Welcome back to Grid Chat. I am your host, Marissa Tandon, and today we're going to be recapping the IndyCar St. Pete opening. I will not be doing that by myself, which I'm very excited to say, because I am joined by a wonderful IndyCar creator, Sarah Offenbach. You can find her everywhere at Offie on Track, and you probably already have, because she makes really good stuff. So I'm excited. Please welcome Sarah to the podcast.
Hi.
Hello, Sarah. I'm excited. I told you, when we were scheduling this, I was like, I've only been covering Formula One and Formula One Academy, but this year I really want to cover IndyCar because I think this series does not get enough attention, in my opinion. I mean, they get a ton of attention. It's huge, but I'm saying that I've discovered some indie band. It's a different type of indie, guys.
Yes. Indie with a Y.
Indie with a Y. But I think I know a lot of the girls who follow this podcast are not familiar with IndyCar at all. And I think that's a shame because it's so much more accessible than Formula One can be in terms of getting to races, in terms of getting to know the drivers. I just think it's a great series to be following. There's a lot of variety. There's a lot closer races right now. So
yeah, I would agree 100%.
Well, I'm curious for you, how did you get into IndyCar?
Yeah, so I've lived in Indy most of my life, Indianapolis. So I grew up going to the track with my dad. We would go for the 500, go to Carb Day. He would take me out of school so we could go see the cars on track. I kind of fell out of it as I got older and discovered all of my interests. So in middle school, high school, I was involved in marching band and show choir and the arts. So I kind of stepped away from sports in general. But when I met my husband, he actually was working towards getting into IndyCar. So he had always dreamed of being an IndyCar engineer. So as our relationship grew, I hung out at the track more and more and kind of fell in love with it. So kind of full circle moment, but yep.
I love that. That is so cool. Did your husband become an IndyCar engineer or is he still chasing his dream?
Yeah, so he is an assistant engineer on Linus Lundqvist's car. So
I love that.
Yeah, so he has worked very hard and loves what he does. So
you know, it's so funny. I joked. I was like, my IndyCar expert. And you're like, yes, I literally have an IndyCar engineer living in my home.
Yes. Yep, I do. Our whole life revolves around it, crazily enough. But, that is part of the chaos.
I love that, though, because it's so cool that you get to later in life share this thing that you started, you loved growing up with your partner.
Yeah.
Do you guys get to travel? Do you travel with him to go to all the different IndyCar races?
Yeah. So the first couple of years, I just went to the races that were local. So I would go to the two that are here in May. So the Indy Road Course and then the 500. It wasn't until Nashville, I want to say 2021, that I went to my first race outside of Indy. We were also getting married later that year. So it was 2022. I can't remember at this point, but they all start blending together. But I went with a friend to Nashville and I was like, this is amazing. I'm obsessed with this. So last year I actually went to 11 of the 17 races and
oh, wow.
Plan on more this year. So
that's amazing. I feel like you have a perfect in. It's what a good excuse too to be actually I'm just supporting my husband.
Yes.
I'm also doing the thing that I love and whatever. You can't stop me.
Yes. We love to joke. I'm like, if I don't go to these, I don't see my husband during the season. So
I mean, there are worse fates of reasons to have to see your husband. This may be a redundant question since you literally have, a household team, but what teams and drivers do you support?
Yeah. So at our wedding, I vowed to my husband that I would always root for his driver first. So I definitely have to say Linus. And, I actually told my husband this the other night. So my personal favorite up until this point has been Scott McLaughlin. We invited him to our wedding because they were doing a segment on Bus Bros where they would answer fan questions. And I jokingly asked them to come to our wedding. And they were like, yeah, we'll come. So I took it a step further and hand delivered invitations to them. They RSVP'd on Bus Bros, which was great because, tracking down RSVPs for a wedding is literal torture. So I was like, great, got that out of the way. It's great. And then they weren't able to come, but Scott actually recorded a video for me that year at the last race, which I think was Laguna Seca. and was like, I would just wish you the best. Like, sorry I can't come. And so like
Aw.
he is just my personal favorite just because, you know, he's so sweet and he always takes
Yeah.
the time for fans. And every time he sees me, he says, hi, how are you doing? Like, how's your husband? So that just like takes it to another level. But I told my husband that I do love Linus like equally. He's so kind. For me personally, you know, people are always like, girls like drivers off of their how they look and how attractive they are, which is not always the case.
Yeah.
For me, it's more of a personality thing. Like, are you willing to like take a second to talk to someone who has like loved you for years? So I really
Yeah.
love the personality aspect of it. But yeah, I would say the Chip Ganassi Racing guys and Scott McLaughlin are my personal favorites.
I love that you brought that up just because we could talk about it for hours of how like women are treated in this fan space, but I cannot stand when people are like, you only like the driver because of how he looks. And I'm like, do you not understand that they're fully covered the entire race? What
Right.
kind of do you know how mentally unwell you would be to like be like, I am gonna watch cars go around in circles for 2.5 hours because I know underneath the helmet and fireproofs and literally it's like they're like Victorian brides. Like you can't see anything the
Right.
entire race.
That is accurate. That is
It's like
very true.
such a wild thing to say. Like to be like, if you could see just their fingertips based off of the fingertip. Actually, oh my God, you can't. You're wearing gloves.
Right. Right.
There's not an inch of skin shown.
Correct.
So it's like I could get it if you were like, oh, you're just watching interviews. That's so odd. But it's like these girls are sitting, these women are
Yes.
sitting, both girls and women are sitting and watching races for hours and also
Right.
going to races, investing money to sit in the stands and watch. Not even like when you go to a race too, like people forget it's not even like any other sport where you can see the whole game happening.
Right.
You can, wherever you're sitting for roughly 0.3 seconds,
Yes.
see your car go by.
If that.
Yeah, it's like it's such a bonkers thing to me. I'm like, I think any sport to say that someone likes it just because their person, like a person is attractive is like wild to me to begin with, but especially any sort of car racing.
Yeah.
You can't anyway. It's my high horse rant about how
Yes.
ridiculous it is.
I actually over the weekend did like a International Women's Day panel with Arrow McLaren, which talked a lot about that kind of stuff, like preconceived notions of women in motorsports and fans of motorsports. So we hit that a lot over the weekend, which was nice just kind of to be in that space with other people going through the same thing.
Yeah, I actually saw a lot of like clips from, or not clips, I guess, but just like people that were at the panel posting about the
Yes.
panel. And I was like, oh, I personally really love the Arrow McLaren team, and I think that's because I love Pato O'Ward a lot. But it's also cool to see like the team behind Arrow McLaren like putting out and saying like, we want to do this panel, we want to talk about women in the space,
Yeah.
and having like women on their social media as well. And yeah, I just think they are making a little bit of an effort to being more inclusive of that space. So I think that's great.
They definitely are. And one of their team managers, Gavin Ward, was actually there.
Oh,
and
cool.
he like raised his hand at the question point and he was like, please forgive me for being a man and asking a question in this space. But he was like, he asked actually the panel, like, what are some changes you would like to see in IndyCar right now for women? Like, because Kate, one of the engineers for McLaren, was like, I just get so mad that there's not pockets in my pants. Like all of my male coworkers have cargo pants with pockets, and I need pockets, but my clothes are women clothes, so I don't have pockets. And so that was really cool that he kind of took that initiative to open the floor for them to kind of say, like, we're working towards this. That's great, but like this is what I need in this space right now.
Isn't that wild to be able to say like in 2024 a female engineer doesn't have pockets? Like,
yeah.
And
we want pockets in everyday clothes, let alone
work clothes.
Yes.
Like that is like sometimes I think I love how we haven't talked about the race at all. We will, I promise, if you're listening. We will get there. But I do think it's so interesting when we talk about women in racing and how a lot of people don't understand when we say that like the playing field's not level and why these little things matter. A lot of people don't think about those things. Like people are not thinking about the fact that like if you're wearing women's clothes in the paddock as a woman, you are just at such a tiny little thing, but you are structurally disadvantaged. Where are you going to put your tools that your male coworkers, your male counterparts have cargo pants? Like sometimes I wish people realize it's that little, it's that tiny.
Yep. And we obviously have the same schedule as everyone that works in IndyCar, so we end up spending a lot of our free time with people who work in that. And one of the female engineers at Ganassi, she told us a story a couple weeks ago about how last May she spent like a half an hour trying to get the grease off of her hands in the women's restroom. And the men could just go into the men's restroom, get the Gojo, which is like a little grittier soap consistency, and clean their hands easy peasy. She went to a team manager at Ganassi. The next day, they were installed in the women's bathroom. It's like, it took like 10 minutes maybe, overnight really, to come up with a solution for that, but it wasn't even a thought. And that's in the garages too. So it's like we're getting there, but
that's wild to me. Yeah. It is really just like your point is so true. It's like it just wasn't a thought. It wasn't a thought that like the women's restroom might need this same thing, even though you are thinking to hire female engineers, you're thinking to hire female employees. And I think this is a big discussion a lot of people are having, especially like in the space of female drivers or series like F1 Academy or things like that, where everyone's saying, okay, like we're focused on getting women into those jobs, but it seems like we're also not focused on making sure that once they get into the space, there is the support that they need to actually succeed. And something as simple as an extra 25 minutes trying to wash your hands is 25 minutes you're not doing your job.
Right. Yeah. And I do want to point out that like the women that do work in IndyCar, I feel like have a great community. I know every May they all try to get together for a little something just to kind of like say like, this is where we were last year, this is how things are going now. But the community of women in IndyCar is becoming so greater, and it makes me so happy to see, even if there's still a long way to go to get to that equalization, but it's definitely getting there.
I do love the to end this like kind of section on a really positive note. What I do really love about what you talked about is each of the problems that you talked about also were presented by someone who did want to fix them. I think that is like the first step. Obviously, hopefully, eventually we get to the part where like you don't have to be told that certain things are problematic or like that certain things are holding people back or need to be changed. But the step before that of getting to that equalization point is someone willing to say, I'm in the position to fix this. How do I fix it? What am I doing wrong? And I do love that you've been able to say like 2 or 3 examples of people who are in those positions, of men who are in those positions willing to say like, what are we doing wrong? How do we fix it? I'm so sorry. Let me get you new pants and some soap.
Yeah. And, sometimes it's not even their doing. It's that they're guys. They don't go into women's restrooms. They don't know that women don't have the same things that men do. So it's women bringing it to their attention and then them taking that step to make sure things are equal playing field.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I am excited about women in IndyCar in general. And I love a lot of like what you were talking about too, of just like the female community, like the community of women in IndyCar on both sides, I think is getting bigger and staying very tight knit, which is great.
Yes, it is. It's this past weekend was very cool. I distinctly remember, so obviously there are wives and girlfriends and fiancés, wags as we like to call them, of like the crew members. And for the first 5 years I was in this, like I would just go to the track by myself and be like, hey, I'm here. That's my husband. We're like, I'm supporting him. And now it's definitely grown and we're getting brunch. We're having fun. We don't have to like sit there and be like, hi, I'm here to support you. Like, what else do I do? So it's cool just to kind of like take the weekend, have that community. But I remember last year at Nashville, I looked at my friend who I went to a lot of races with, and I said, where are all these women coming from? Because just down pit lane, it was like group of women after group of women after group of women. And I was like, this is new. I'm not like the only female in this space anymore.
That's so great.
Yeah.
I love that, like, it's like there was a moment where you just were walking, you were like, "Oh my God, hello. Hi, Barbie." Like, it's
Yes.
so nice.
Literally, it was I just was like, "I don't think I've ever seen this many females at an IndyCar race before." So that was very cool to, like, witness kind of a distinct like, "Oh
Yeah.
my god, there are females here. Great.
Yeah.
Let's have fun."
I love it. Well, let's talk about like what it was like being at the season opener. You were actually at the race, which I'm very jealous of.
Yes.
And the race was at St. Petersburg, Florida, St. Pete, as we like to say. What was it like?
It was very hot. Got very sunburnt, on the first day, which was not great, but it was
Oh my
great.
God.
It was like the crowd was electric, and
Mhm.
something I'd like to point out is they've been getting a lot of attention for less viewers on TV, but there were record-breaking numbers at this race this year.
Mm.
So, I was doing the grid walk on race day, and it's something I would change about that is not putting a McLaren right at the entrance of the grid walk because that was mass chaos. I have never had a harder time finding my husband's car because I was like, all I see is papaya.
Yeah.
um, but it was so crowded, and you typically don't see that unless you're at like Indy 500 or like a
Mm.
race that is like usually sells out. So that was
Mhm.
very cool to see kind of that growth from last year because I did attend last year as well. But it was great. The drivers were all excited. All the fans are glad to finally be back. And,
Mhm.
I went to the autograph session. All the drivers were so happy to see the fans again. And it was just a good time. Aside from it being very hot and humid, race day was actually great. Just the 2 days leading up were hot and humid. So,
Oh, that's actually nice. Like, it ended up being kind of chill when you were
yes.
actually at the race.
Yes.
I love that. Um, I I do like what you're saying about, like, that's such a good point about the fact that people are actually coming out to races
Yeah.
more often than as opposed to, like, watching from home. Especially because I think the next race on the calendar is actually just it's not gonna count for any points or anything for the driver sitting. It's just made for TV
Yes.
racing at the Thermal Club, which
Yep.
is gonna be honestly pretty cool. I'm excited to see, like, what does made for TV racing look like?
Yes. Yeah.
Because it'll be the first time that they're doing that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I'm excited to
Yeah.
see what it is. It's something, at least as far as I've been following it, that we haven't done before. So
Mhm.
I'm excited to see what an exhibition style race looks like for IndyCar.
Yeah, I'm curious to see if, like, partially something similar to what NASCAR did at the right before
The
the season kicked
clash.
off with, like,
Yeah.
yeah, the Bud Light Clash, which also, like, unfortunately for them ended up with because I'm in LA and we had, like, a wild storm.
Yeah.
They were like, "Actually, just come, it's free. The
Yes.
cars cannot go out tomorrow. Really sorry about that." But obviously in the Coliseum, they're in, like, a space that's not made for
Right.
necessarily the best type of NASCAR racing. So it is just like an exhibition, and I'm curious to see the Thermal Club is set up for racing for sure. For anyone who doesn't know what the Thermal Club is, it's like a community that has multiple racetracks. It has like you can live there, you can buy a home, but it has a significant amount of tracks that are built for racing like this.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to see what like made for TV means because I think when you look at like the Clash with NASCAR, that was made for get fans to come see cars and be interested in NASCAR.
Yeah.
And then like with this made for TV is I don't know, it's gonna be interesting. If you want to go to the race itself, it's like $500, but you get the entire VIP like food and drink and paddock club experience type of thing, or you can just watch it at home. So
Yeah. Yeah.
we'll
We
see.
like to call it a country club, but instead of a golf course, there's racetracks. So kind of
That's
deal.
a way better explanation. Such a better explanation than what I just said. I was like, you can buy a house there and
Yes.
there's
Yeah.
racetracks and food.
Yeah. Hey,
I think they even have a pool.
yeah.
You're like country club. Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah, we actually have one of our best friends, works in NASCAR. He's one of the engineers for William Byron, and we
Mhm.
were we were so excited to watch it on TV, but the night before we were at Monster Jam and he texted us,
Oh,
"Hey, we're racing tonight." And I was like, "What?" Like, "We're at Monster Jam, we can't watch." So, I was kind of sad about that, but yeah, it should be something similar, I'm hoping. I don't really know what to expect from it, so we're just gonna take it in and see how it goes, I guess.
fair enough. Yeah, I think it'll be I don't know, I'm excited to watch
Yeah,
it. It's not so far from me. I was like, should I go? I don't know. But I
always
don't know.
go.
I know, right? I should go. I'm going to the Long Beach race. So I'm like,
Okay.
that feels like a good settled
Yes.
start for me.
Yes.
We'll see.
I'm looking up flights to Long Beach as we
Oh,
speak. So
see you soon. See you
yeah.
soon. Well, let's talk about the race itself, because now I just realized we've spent like a bunch of time talking about races that are coming up.
Yes.
So you know what? Good preview. If you're just starting to watch IndyCar, you'll never believe this. There are more races after this one. So this one, this is our season opener. We're finally back. I'm pretty excited about it. I can tell you're pretty excited about it.
Yes.
I would think anyone who's listening now knows we should be excited about it. But I think the headline that came out of this race was very much like Penske and Chevy, because Chevy did a lot of work during the off season, and I think it very visibly paid off in this race.
Yeah, they dominated.
Yeah,
Unfortunately from our perspective, but they were
fair
killer
enough.
this weekend.
With your like perspective of having followed it for so long, and also having your husband and like your connections to the engineering side, like
Yeah.
the garage side, was it shocking to see Chevy like dominate in such a way?
Not really. It's not really like F1 where like clearly like one is superior than the other and the rest just
Yeah.
kind of fall in. IndyCar is very much like it ebbs and flows. Like
Yeah.
I think out of the last 11 championships, Chip Ganassi Racing has won 6 and Team Penske has won 5. So it's very
Mm,
much an even playing field and it ebbs and flows. Some races, some years these cars are better, some years these cars are better at this racetrack. It just
yeah.
very much depends and with like the off-season testing, the development of what they find out at those tests can vary as well. So,
Sure.
yeah.
That makes sense. So for anyone who's not familiar, the top 4 cars that came in were Chevy, and then fifth was a Honda. And then out of those top 4, 3 of the top 4 were Penske, and only one of them like split in at second was Pato O'Ward in an Aero McLaren. So it's very clear like that the kind of time that they took over the off season, it definitely paid off, which I always think is interesting, because so much of like racing in general, regardless of what series it is about that car development time before you actually hit the track. And I think we talk so much, like when we talk about racing, we talk so much about like the drivers and what they managed to do in the race. But a lot of times we don't talk about all of the stuff and all of the team in the garage that like builds the car, that
Yeah.
works, like the guys at the end. And I think that's got to be such a nice payoff. Like once you, regardless of, I almost honestly to some degree, and this is saying this is someone who doesn't do it, so I'm probably incorrect, but it feels like even just like to me, I'm always like, man, everybody got a car out there and it drove. Like that's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's a crazy time. Everyone
Yeah.
sees, oh, the first race is in March, the last race is in September. That's nice to
Mhm.
work 6 months a year. It's in reality like this past off season was the busiest one they've had since my
Mhm.
husband and I have been together. It's like,
Mhm.
oh, I can't wait for race season to get here so I can actually see you at this point. Because they did a lot of testing, a lot of development, and sometimes the off season is busier because you're trying to do better than you did the year before and
Mm.
learn more. So,
It definitely makes sense. And like I maybe just as like a little bit of a nerd, I always am like so interested in the little tiny tweaks that can be made. Like I think all of the math that goes into racing is probably so over my head, but I love it. I'm so interested in it. And then okay, this is such a little thing, but I was like when I was watching the broadcast, so I don't know at the track if they broadcast like the same commentary or if you don't hear it at all.
you don't hear
Okay,
it.
that's what I assumed. Like, it's too loud. There's no way unless you're like wearing headphones with the broadcast on it, which I
Correct.
get also. Well, so there's one. It was during lap 1. It was right off the top. The commentary, I wrote it down because of how shocked I was by the. I don't know why I was shocked, but I just like the way it was said. I was like, oh my god, I feel like I am watching like a soap opera to some degree, because he says, Felix Rosenquist in the pink and white AutoNation Sirius XM Bon Jovi radio car. He is trying to rock and roll around the streets of St. Pete.
We love our Lee Diffie. We love him.
I was like, Lee, that is every sponsor on the car. You don't have to say every sponsor.
Yeah.
It was like, and it was the thing that was so funny about it is it was like also they gave you a shot of the halo, so you're reading it along with Lee. You're like that car is in fact pink and white. It is a Sirius XM AutoNation John Bon Jovi. Like, I was like, hello.
Hey, he's making sure they are getting their plug, and I love it.
I was like, you know what, to some degree, because I saw a lot of comments actually when I was like I watched the race and then I usually rewatch like highlights when I'm putting together our race recap. And so when I was rewatching the highlights, that one was actually one that was in the highlight. I was like, oh my God, yeah, you're right. He did do that. And the comments were just losing it. They were like, Lee, you can just say the number of the car. You can just say this. And I was like, you know what? Sirius XM John Bon Jovi Radio all paid good money for that, as well did AutoNation.
You know, it's a big deal because Bon Jovi was actually at the race. He
That's cool.
did a 2-seater ride, which if you don't know what that is, it is an Indy car, but it has 2 seats. So ex-drivers will kind of drive them around. They call it the fastest seat in racing or something like that. And they get to take a lap around the track with an ex-driver. At this race in particular was Elio Castroneves, who's won 4 Indy 500s. And so it was very cool to see that take place. It's always very cool to see who's there. So I love that they kind of plugged him because he was there. He was like, when can I get back in the car? Because that was amazing. But as far as the sponsorship goes, like in racing, like I remember growing up, my dad watched NASCAR like crazy. And Jeff Gordon was my favorite. Why? I don't know. He had a lot of cool colors on his car. He was called the Rainbow Warrior. Like, and that is so iconic. And that is what a lot of people associate drivers with. So it's kind of like you see something, you think of it.
Yeah.
And there's definitely been like, I've been like researching like a service I need. And I'm like, oh, like this provides this service. That was a sponsor in IndyCar. Like I feel more comfortable using that because I'm familiar with the name. As dumb as that is, like sponsorship works. It's the people that are making the sport possible and able to run. So I don't mind that they say it. I know some people might feel like it's a commercial, but I'm like, hey, I remember this like life insurance from Colton Herta's car. Let's go with that.
Let's go with that one. I actually, you know what though? I kind of think that that's such a good point is it's like, obviously it's what sponsorship is meant to do, right? But you're looking at it and you're saying like, well, I like IndyCar, you sponsor IndyCar to some degree. We have something in common, you and me, this big corporation. Like, I think that's why people do it. That's why corporations go for it. And I think sometimes it's fine. And also I love that John Bon Jovi was there. Like, I think that's so fun. Get in the car and like, don't just slap your name on the side of it, you know?
Right. Yeah.
And I will say like the celebrity aspect of it is always an easy way to get people into something.
Yep.
And that's great. Like you're bringing more people to the track. You're bringing more people to watching the races like on TV. It's very easy for people to be like, well, I'm going to support the John Bon Jovi radio car. I don't know who's in it, but I love John Bon Jovi. Like,
Yep.
like that's okay. And it's similarly like one of the things I watched recently that I really enjoyed, which I recommend if you haven't watched IndyCar, just to like get a little kickoff, because you'll get enough out of it that you'll be like, oh, I could watch this, and this, and then really get into the racing, is the 500 Days to Indy docuseries that they did, which like is fascinating because they don't really talk about most of the season. They really just focus on the Indy 500. But I was watching it and I was like, why is David Letterman here? Like, what a weird... I was like, does he just really like IndyCar? And then he was like, I've owned this racing team for all of this time. And I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
How cool.
100 Days to Indy is great. It definitely showcases like both sides of the drivers' lives. Like, this is my home life. This is my race life. This is how those two intertwine, which obviously for me is a big part of it. I love seeing the progression and the hype up into Indy. My hope for that show, because we're getting season 2, is also to focus a little more on the rest of the season. I feel like it showcased that so much, and I really want it to dive into the traditions of the 500. Because people are like, oh yeah, the Indy 500. But like, what people don't realize is that is a whole month-long celebration here. People literally leave their houses and their jobs for a month, come camp out here just so they can do all of the things regarded to that one race. It's a huge thing. And, you know, it's so cool to see people take it for what it is. And I love it, but I want a little more.
Yeah, no, I agree. I would have loved, there's like two things I hope we get out of continuing the series. One, more episodes. It's so short and it's great. It's like everything about it is really fun, but it is literally just like such a quick breeze. I think it was 6 episodes
Yes.
the first season.
It definitely, I didn't know what to expect from it because it was like the first time they've ever done something like that. And it was great, but I
Yeah.
just want a little more from it. In the second
Yeah.
season, I'm expecting more.
You're like, I'm putting my foot down. We're going to
Yes.
see what I want to see. I would have liked also to see, which like, this is just again by nature of how big the grid is and how many people there are, but I would have liked to have seen more drivers covered because it really only follows like maybe 6 drivers pretty heavily with like cameos or quick clips from other drivers. And I think it could do, like, again, as we've both said, like, great base. Really enjoyed it. So glad it's continuing. Here are some notes for what we would like to see.
Right. Yeah.
Moving forward. No complaints, but just some like additions.
Yeah. Which they probably won't listen to me, but you know.
Hey, if anybody's listening, I've got someone you should call. She can help you out. But I really would love, like, on any of these series where we talk about like watching documentaries about the like sport of racing in general, I really would love to see more about like not just the drivers as well. Like this one we got a lot of like home life, but I also would like to see like more about what goes into building the car. Like I'm desperate for any one of these documentaries to be like, here is what preseason or like off-season work, like testing looks like. This is what we're looking for. And I know maybe that's not like the drama. Maybe that's just more like the technical. But what I'm looking for is a documentary that explains how you build a car. Thank you.
Yeah. And you know, that too is a fine line because that's at least in IndyCar. I know it's different in other racing series, but those how they build the car type of situations because everyone has the same car. They either have a Honda engine or a Chevy engine. So like how they build the car is how they perform better.
Yeah.
And also with strategy, there's various things that go into it, but that's a big part of it. So
yeah,
that's maybe why we haven't seen so much of it, at least in IndyCar, is because like those things are kind of confidential or try to be
very
at least. But
yeah, they're like, please don't look at us.
Yes.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I think it's interesting. I would love to see more of it, but also you raise such a good point for anybody who's not familiar with IndyCar. Like the playing field is much more level than other series that you're going to be watching. So everybody's got one of 2 engines. That's it. That's the case.
Yep. They have the same chassis, just difference of an engine and what development you can do with the other parts of the car.
So it's like that's why you're going to see those races be so much closer and why it does feel like it can be more dependent on the driver or dependent on like the entire team building small changes, strategy changes and everything like that, which I think for right now, like what everything that's running, I think it is one of the more exciting series because of that. Like there is a lot more direct competition because of the fact that there's a little bit more of a level playing field in terms of the car.
Yeah, definitely. Last year I went to Texas. We're not going there this year. But I remember like standing up and shouting at the race, which I'm a very passionate person, especially when it comes to sports, but I've never sat there and like at the race, but like, oh, and the whole race I was doing that because you can see the entire oval, which is also something that's very unique to that track, I feel like. But seeing just how close they're racing, how close the moves they're making are, I just was like, this is the best thing ever. I was filled with excitement, screaming, and it just is insane to see. Like you make one adjustment on the car and you're like, that's the difference of being up in the front or in the back. And that's just so crazy to me that the small little things is what make that huge difference.
Yeah, I think it's a big standout of like the series itself, of how it works and why you should be watching it, like why it becomes so exciting to watch because like you're saying, like the moves are so close. It's every little thing it really does become so much more about like the strategy and the little tiny changes, which I love. Okay, so just by nature of it being the first race of the season, there were a couple of things that made me go and I was very stressed, which were, one, we already had like a puncture right out the gate. Lap 1, Lundgaard was like, it hurts. My tire, help, please. So that was that was stressful for me. And then I will tell you the one thing that really did throw me though, I was like at my house, like, oh my God, was when Colin Brown's car, like they were refilling it and he just caught fire. I guess because it looked like on camera, it looked like a little bit of like a overfill or like when they took the gas tank out, a gas pump out, it kept filling and then it literally caught fire and he just sort of like kept driving until it was no longer on fire.
Yeah. Yeah. So, that happens. So my husband actually, when he worked at Andretti previously, he was the little guy standing there with like we call it a fire extinguisher. It's not really a fire extinguisher. It's basically to spray the car in case there is any drippage from fuel. Because unlike, I know in NASCAR, they have the individual gas cans. All the fuel is in one cell in IndyCar.
Okay.
And they have someone, this is my husband's jobs now, but he like lifts what they call the dead man, which lets the gas flow. And I think it fills like 16 gallons per second or something crazy like that. That might not be exactly correct, but that's what I think it is. At least from what he has told me. So there's a lot of gas flowing in such a short amount of time that they have to kind of spray down the car just to make sure. And if you watch that clip, there's no spray until like very late. So I don't know if that was, I obviously it was like kind of a far shot from the pit stop, but there definitely could have been some drippage. I don't know exactly what happened there, but it's a lot happening in such a short amount of time. And IndyCar, different from Formula One, they don't have as many people over the wall. So they are just trying to do the same thing that Formula One does, except with less people. So it takes a little longer than an F1 stop, but it's still pretty quick that you're trying to do all that in.
Yeah, I would say like sometimes I'm always like, and in any pit stop, people criticize it so much. And I'm like, maybe this is just me being like a people pleaser or non-confrontational. I'm like, that just seems like a lot of work to be upset with them about. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot to do. It's a high stress environment. Like, okay, fine. He dripped a little gas. What's the big deal? Like,
and the pits are a lot of how you gain position on track at certain tracks, or you could lose it. I mean, the driver has to pull in exactly perfect. The tire guys have to be on their mark with the air gun. You can't drop anything. You can't let a tire fly. Like, there are just so many things that have to go exactly right in order for you to have a perfect pit stop. And everyone has to be on their A game. So it's a lot of work, and they do a lot of practice for it. So they really have a hard job during that race. I would not want to be in charge of that. I would not want to be responsible for that. Maybe holding the little number sign I could do, but that's about it.
I like that idea, except for like, I think I've seen at least 3 videos of people with the number getting hit. Like, I don't want to do it.
They're on the other side of the wall, so we're not risking, you know what?
Okay,
there.
That's fair. You know what? I'll take it. If I had to, it would be the number guy.
Yeah.
But then I'm sure also we're talking about it so casually, but I'm like, I'm sure that person is like, got to get the number exactly where it needs to be. And this is going to be very stressful. There's wind out today. Like I don't think there's any easy job in the pits.
There's not. And I'll tell you, those things are top heavy. I've held one and to hold it like level is the most difficult thing in the world. I'm like, you would think it'd be so easy just holding it, but you have to be like gripping it and using your muscles for that thing. It's crazy.
I tell you what, the number guy and I'm sure there's an official title for this as well. We're just like, that number guy, that guy who holds the number, or gal, whoever wants to hold it, but they are giving like the boom mic person, you know what I mean? Like the unsung hero of the race.
Yep.
So
got to know where to pull in. You just have to.
And then turn 10 for some reason was just the enemy of the people this weekend.
Enemy of Ganassi, for sure.
We had 2 crashes there, basically, or not 2 crashes. We had one that was like Marcus Armstrong did crash into the barrier, and then we also had Lundqvist basically like have contact with Romain Grosjean and spin into the barrier as well. Which those ones, every time someone gets spun and is like like just sort of the opposite direction and just needs to make a U-turn to keep driving is the most stressful for me, because I'm like, I can hear the thoughts, I feel like, of just like everyone couldn't everyone just pause and let me out? Just let me make my left turn. I have a race to do. Like, please let me in. So I felt so bad for him. I was like, this is the worst. Your car visibly can keep going. He
Yep.
did continue. Ugh.
Yep. It was heartbreak city for for Ganassi in turn 10 this weekend. Marcus's was sad because my husband was on his car last year as his assistant
Oh,
engineer.
yeah.
And he finished every race. He didn't have any issues. He did
Aw.
not have any contact. So it broke my heart for him that the first race of this year that happened. But he'll come back. He'll be great.
Yeah.
So just unfortunate that that happened. But as far as the other incident, yeah.
Yeah. Like, it did happen.
Yep.
It did happen.
Yep. I felt so bad for Linus. I immediately, as soon as it happened, I was like, I want to give him a hug because he was doing so well. And my mind instantly went back to, so he did a race for Meyer Shank last year at
Okay.
Nashville when one of their drivers, Simon Pagenaud, got injured at a race prior. And he was running, I think in sixth, which everyone was like, hold on, this guy has not driven an IndyCar in a race before. What's happening? And I was like, he's so good. This was before I knew him and had interacted with him at all. He crashed his car and he immediately was like, oh no, I've ruined it. I'm so sorry, guys. It came on the radio. It was like, I've ruined everything. I'm so sorry. It was a stupid mistake. And I was like, stop. Stop right there.
Oh.
Stop right there. But I actually got a chance to talk with him after the race. And he said, you know what? It's not something you can control. It's just something that happened. And I really just feel sorry for the guys that spent so much time putting in the effort on my car. It was unfortunate, but it's part of it. It's the first race. It happens. You got to move on, continue on.
Yeah. I think sometimes the thing that's always a bummer is when the contact is caused by another driver or just caused by, it's a racing incident, whatever. But very much watching it, you're so sad because you're watching another driver's race get ended over something that wasn't necessarily, and not ended, he did finish, but obviously he was driving well. It was a bummer to watch. And then again, like I said, the worst kind. It's one thing when you crash and you're just okay, race is over, but it's another thing to get spun out and just have to cautiously wait, especially on a turn that you can't see people coming.
Right.
And you're waiting on your, you're communicating with your engineering team saying okay, can I go now? Nope. Okay, can I go now? Nope. Cool. And so it's, I don't know. I was very sad for him.
Yeah, I was too. Selfishly, but also
selfishly.
Personally. Yeah, it's, and something too is that these people are humans. They make mistakes just who has run a red light on accident before? Most of us who it just happens. It is their job, but they do make mistakes. But yeah, it was very heartbreaking. But he got to finish the race. He still got to get some points. He gave his guys, race lifetime experience, which is so important, especially when you're working with a new team and communicating with a new team, kind of getting that ebb and flow. So yeah, I'm just thankful he was able to finish and we could keep on to next race.
Yeah, I do like your point that I think a lot of us forget as just watching the race and thinking about, driver standings and points and championships. A lot of times we don't think about the fact that each race, just completing the race gives data that allows the team to be better for the next race. So there's something as well about the pride swallowing, the ego swallowing moment of having to be I'm not going to finish where I want to finish in this race. I was having a better race, and still being able to kind of, drive to the best of his abilities and give the team that data as well so that the team can continue on to a better race next week. I guess this has become my new podcast. I love Linus Lundqvist.
Me too.
We did, ironically though, the person involved in that crash did not finish the race. Romain Grosjean did not complete the race. Neither did Marcus Armstrong, Marcus Ericsson, or Stingray Robb, which is always going to be my favorite name on the grid. Don't care if he ever it's what a name. What a name.
It is a name, that is for sure.
I just kind of like it because I'm you know what? I never thought about it, but if I were to be a racer, I would legally change my name to something that would be wild for the announcers to have to put out. I don't know if you ever think about this or if it's just me and my nighttime insomnia, but I'm what would be the weirdest thing that they would have to say? I also wonder, to some degree, I'm like, could we give all of the drivers, like all the IndyCar drivers, like racehorse names as well? Like the prancing, like what? They're always so wild.
Yeah,
Racehorse names,
they
like
are.
Lucky Prancing Pony takes
Yes.
the
I
takes
think
the lead.
Lee Diffie does a great job at that. He'll be saying something and I'm like, "Where did that come from?" And and then he refers to them as that the rest of the season. It's like, "Well, that's their name now." So
It actually reminds me, there's something very like at home about it because it reminds me of like my favorite history teacher that I ever had in high school. And he was like elderly. I think he was already in his 70s, like, or 80s by the time he was teaching me. But he had this lore about him that once you got into his class, because he only taught like honors and AP classes, once you got into his class, he gave you a nickname. He gave everybody a nickname. And I think it was because he couldn't remember people's real names, despite the fact that he had them on like a roster at the front of the room. He would give you a nickname. And then that was just like how you were known for the rest of your time in that class. And if you took his second class the same way. So every time, like, I'm like, am I supposed to be keeping track of all of the nicknames that you're giving these drivers so that I also like, I feel like I need a spreadsheet.
Yeah, I love that so much. Yeah, nicknames are great. I made friendship bracelets for the race and I made some with some of their nicknames on it, which was funny because like Renus VK, he I think called himself Greenus in like the content day at the very beginning of the year because he has a green car now and he was like, "My name's Greenus." And I was like, "All right, I'm making a bracelet that says Greenus." And he was like, "It says Greenus. I love it." And I was like, it's just something so little and simple, but it's so funny. I love nicknames. I love it.
I love it. I love also the friendship bracelet like trend coming to the track now.
Yeah.
I know it's become basically like the new thing for everything, every concert, every event you go to, everybody's doing friendship bracelets. I will say, as a fan who is not crafty, it is stressful. I do feel like I have a whole new homework assignment as a woman going to go do something, going to do anything.
Oh,
You must have an armful of bracelets to exchange. But did you see Pato Award's video that he did of all his bracelets?
yes, he was wearing one of mine. Love him.
Was he? Were
Yeah.
you the one who infamously gave him a daddy bracelet?
No.
Because that
No, no, no. No, no, no. My husband worked with him when he was in Indy Lights, and so he was very much like 18, I think, at the time.
Yeah.
And I have come across Pato Thirst Trap on TikTok, and I'm like, skip, because I cannot.
Like, that's
cannot.
a child. Yeah. No, that's so I saw that bracelet and I was like, hello? Like, what are we doing? Like, what are we doing here? I love that someone had the sense of self to be able to do that and not be like overwhelmed. But for me,
Nope.
I'd be like, here is a bracelet that has your number on it.
Yep.
Enjoy. Yep. I do love that you have just like this image of Pato of like, he was 18 when I met him and he'll be 18 for the rest of his life. Like, that's it. Do you care to share what bracelet on his arms was from your craft corner?
It just said Pato on it. It wasn't anything not anything crazy. Not anything crazy.
You know what? I like that though. You have to have some normal ones for the wild ones to stand out.
Yes.
So
Yes. I definitely made some unhinged ones, but they were definitely not up to par with some of those other ones that I've seen.
Yeah, he had like in that video, he has like at least 40 bracelets on.
Yeah.
Like there was a lot of bracelets being exchanged.
Yeah, I saw people like, which I personally wouldn't recommend doing, but they had like tried to find a driver all weekend and couldn't, but like saw their scooter hanging out, so they like put it on their scooter. Which always stresses me out because that's like their personal property, and I'm like, yeah. But there were definitely some that loved the bracelets, and others that were like, "Thanks, I'm giving this to my wife right now." So, yeah. I
love like the energy of watching drivers have to like you said. I guess last year you said you looked around and you were like, "There's so many more women here than I've ever seen."
Yeah.
I do love that like the fangirl culture is coming into a sport that has been so dominated by like male fans for so long that now you have like a lot of drivers being like, I don't really understand why I'm getting beaded bracelets, but I am not against it. Actually, I think I love this.
Yep. Their wives definitely love it. So I know Scott McLaughlin is like, oh, like I give my wife my bracelets at the end of the day and she
Aw.
just loves receiving them. So I'm like, I don't wear them like out on a normal day-to-day basis, but I'll definitely wear them
Sure.
at the event that I made them for. So
Yeah.
it's just fun to kind of, and I'll say it's a nice way to meet people. So I made like 365 bracelets
Oh my
for the
gosh.
race. Yeah, it was
Mhm.
a lot. It weighed like 20 pounds and I was carrying that around all race weekend, which I also do not recommend. I need to find a better situation for
System.
that. Yep.
Yeah.
But it was very fun. Like people were just stopping me and people were like, "Oh my gosh, I've seen you post these on Instagram and TikTok."
Aw.
And like to the point where my in-laws were like, "Are you like famous?" And I was like, "No." And they were like, "What's happening?" And I was like, "I don't really know. Like this has never happened to me before." So,
The
yeah.
algorithm is happening.
I was like, I'm just passing out bracelets and meeting people and having fun.
Yeah.
And I did have these older ladies that I was eating breakfast next to on, I think it was race day.
Mhm.
And they were like, "What are those?" And I was like, "Oh, they're friendship bracelets." And the lady was like, "Can I please have one?" She was like, "I do a lot of bead work." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, like, sure, no big deal." And she and her friend came up to me at the racetrack and they were like, "I just want you to know, like, this made my day. Like, seeing
Aw.
other like young females get into this type of work is so amazing." And then one lady was like, "Here's like a donation to make more," and handed me money. And
Aw.
I don't want
Yeah.
money. Like, and she's like, "No, please." Like, it just brought me so much joy. So it's like combining all the like female womanhood, like girly things into
Yeah.
that space is just so sweet. And hearing people say, like, "This made my day," like, I love it so much. For
Oh,
something that literally took me like 5 minutes to make is
yeah.
just so sweet.
That is the sweetest. I really love that. I really love like overall how much I think the internet shift into like creating a fandom space for racing and for IndyCar. Like it's really lovely to see this sort of connection because I think even like, 3, 4 years ago, and you can speak to this better than I can because I wasn't going to races back then. I think there was like a space where you felt a little more uncomfortable in the space. Like just as a fan, I felt more uncomfortable talking about it or posting about it.
Yeah.
And now there's just been this whole wave of now you're like, I'm going to wear 20 pounds of friendship bracelets on my belt so that you can come approach me and like know there's like something really nice about like signaling like I am a friendly face, like come say hi,
Yes.
come make a new friend. I really love that.
Yeah, and I'm trying to like process back to when I first got into it. I don't know if it was me just like being more shy or like if the community's already always been there and I've just been like, I'm new at this. I don't know like what to do. But it felt
Yeah.
very much like it was like the older generation of workers, wives and girlfriends and whatnot just there. And you'd be like, "Oh, hi," like friendly, but
Yeah.
not like friendly. So
Sure.
it definitely has changed, like, the more time has gone on, the more people you meet. Like, my husband started at Andretti. He was there
Mhm.
for a few years, then he moved to Foyt, and then he was at Foyt for, like, half a year, and then went to Ganassi. So
Mhm.
moving from each of those, you now know people at 3 teams. You
Mhm.
now, like, have seen these people for years around the track, and so it just becomes a great space to you meet someone, you introduce this person, it just is a whole thing. It grows so quickly, and it's so fun. I love it so much.
I love that. That's so lovely.
Yeah.
Um, oh, well, I
I could
love
talk
that.
for days. Sorry.
I know, same. No, I think it's great. To be honestly, like there was not a ton of like big highlights of this race. We had, it opened, they did it.
It
There
was
were
a
a couple of
very boring
crashes.
race in terms of IndyCar races.
Yeah. It was, it's like I think the excitement for me, I was like, we're back. And then I was like,
We're
okay,
back.
like
Yep.
we're back. We did it.
Yep.
So there wasn't like a lot of super big highlights. We did have like, and again, I guess this is also partially why what I'm about to say is partially why there wasn't a lot of highlights. Joseph Newgarden won, and he led 92 of the 100 laps. So it was sort of, unless something very bad had happened, it was pretty understood that that was what was going to happen.
Yep.
He won by 8 seconds ahead of Pato Award. Then also the one thing that I will say, like I love stats at the end of the race, and IndyCar loves to give you the stats, which is my favorite thing. So there the whole race, I'm going to just read these off because I didn't memorize them. Because why would I? You know what I mean? They're useless after this. As soon as I say them, no one needs to know them.
Yep.
So the race was 100 laps for a total runtime of an hour and 51 minutes and 29.5954 seconds. That's rounded up for the statisticians listening. And then Joseph Newgarden's average speed was 96.867 miles per hour across the entire race. So that's like including, braking zones and everything like that. If you take his entire average speed, he was going at about 96.867 miles per hour for the race, which I thought was like, I really love when you put it into those stats. Obviously, at certain points, like you're going much faster and at certain points you're going much slower.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea of driving at an average pace of 96.867 miles per hour for an hour and 51 minutes is sometimes kind of a little hard to fathom to me.
Yeah. Especially around some of those corners.
Yeah. Like, whew. So that was cool. And then this was also, which I think just kind of like takes us back to what we talked about at the very opening of this episode. This was Joseph's first like street circuit victory in almost 2 years, which like in his post race interview, like he talked about the fact that like a lot of that was down to Chevy and a lot of that was down, and the rest of it was down to his team. And then Pato also like talked about Chevy's improvements. So you have those top 4 drivers finishing with the same engine and giving credit to the engine manufacturers and then also their own teams as well. So I don't know, it was, interesting.
Pretty good stats.
I guess my question for you actually is like, normally this is where we do season predictions, like next race and also like season overall. And I guess IndyCar has a very specific difference, which is like the biggest race happens in the middle of the season with the Indy 500. Who do you see? Like, do you see Joseph Newgarden staying on top? Do you see some changes, some shifts? What do you hope to see out of the season?
Yeah, I thought about this and, I think the smaller teams are going to be a surprise this year. So, like, I'm thinking like the Ed Carpenter, AJ Foyt, Juncos, those teams, I think they're going to be a surprise this year. So, as far as like individual people, I mean, I would love to see Scott McLaughlin repeat his Barber win. Especially because my favorite sponsor's there. Shout out Good Ranchers. But yeah, I'm hoping Ganassi has a good season, comparable to last year, hopefully. I'm interested to see how I'm interested to see how his season compares to last, because he dominated last year. He obviously ended up winning the championship. He was fast all May. He won the pole for the 500. He was on track to potentially win the 500 before the pit lane incident that happened. So I'm interested to see how the rest of the season plays out for them, selfishly.
Yeah. I really like that there's like so many teams that have so much heart about them in IndyCar. Like, I'm excited to see these smaller teams like you're seeing, and I hope you're right that they do end up being a surprise and we get to kind of see a big push or at least, a fight for a challenge too, because I think also like just talking, like we were talking earlier about Lundqvist, like there was a good race being put in. Like it was a situation where I think like there could have been a fight there and at least to move up, not necessarily to win and not necessarily to like, like we said, Joseph was in the lead for most of the race.
Right.
So I don't want anyone to come for me and be like, where do you think he was going? But what I mean is that there was very much like good performance being put in, and had the incident not happened the way it did, like I would have been interested to see where he ended up in the final. So I am hopeful, because it wasn't, again, like we said, like not a car fault, not necessarily a driver fault, depending on who you ask, whatever.
Racing incident.
It was just an incident. But yes, like so. Outside of the incident, I would love to see like where he ends up next race, because I think that'll show kind of where we're going for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I'm gonna go out on a limb here, and my husband will say I'm jinxing us, but I'm knocking on wood right now. So
I'm knocking on wood too.
Yep, Linus Lundqvist for Rookie of the Year.
Ooh, I love that. That's a good pitch. I'm into that.
Let's go. Yeah.
Well, Sarah, this has been so much fun. Thank you for joining me to talk about IndyCar.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Well, if the people listening at home would like to find you on the internet, to find your friendship bracelets, to, track you down on track in a non-stalker way, in a cool way, where can they find you on the internet?
Yeah, it's Offie_on_track. So OFFEY is Offie.
And as always, if you don't want to watch these races alone or the F1 races alone, you can join the actual grid chat. I host a group chat of motorsports fans where fan behavior is encouraged, and there's no such thing as a stupid question. We watch these races live together, chat about breaking news, and of course, send each other an unhealthy amount of memes. If you'd like to join the grid chat, you can do so at tandemproductions.com/grid chat. There will also be a link to that in the episode description. Once you fill out the form on the webpage there, you'll get an invite via email from me. If you want to connect, let me know what you thought about the episode, or even just ask me another question that you'd like me to cover on the show. You can find me on all social media platforms at Marissa Kamari. And one of the best ways to connect with me is if you're listening to this podcast on Herd FM. You can find me in the community section on Herd FM, where my username is just my first name, Marissa. And once we follow each other, after every episode that you listen to, I'll be able to comment and have a conversation with you directly. So again, my username on Herd FM is Marissa. As always, I've been your host, Marissa Tandon, and thank you for joining the Grid Chat.